Hi everybody, welcome back. So just to recap, in Unit 1, we worked on two main things. We worked on multiplying polynomials, and we also did a lot of work with exponents. When you would multiply out your polynomials, you would get some answer, right? This whole unit that we're going to be starting today is going to be doing the reverse, okay? So it's going to be what's called factoring. So we're going to be given some problem, and we're going to try to figure out what things would multiply together that would have given us that answer. It's a lot like how division is kind of considered the opposite of multiplication, just kind of working backwards, okay? So you might remember we did look at a difference of squares, but back in the last unit, I would have given you this piece here, this a plus b times the quantity a minus b, and then I would have said, oh, and then the shortcut is do a squared minus b squared. So that was just to get you familiar with the difference of squares. So what we're doing here is the opposite. You're going to be given something like a squared minus b squared, and then tell me that it's the quantity a plus b times the quantity a minus b. So the difference just means subtraction, and the squares just means that I have two things that are squared. Okay, so this will only work if there's subtraction, and if I have two things that we can find that square root, okay? So let's go ahead and get started with this first example. Number 1, x squared minus 16. So do I have a difference of squares? I do, because I have two things with a minus in between, and I can find some number squared that will be x squared and the 16 squared, right? So if I were to have x squared and write that as something squared, it's already done for me for this first one, right? X squared. Now I have to try to think this minus 16. Is there some way that I can pick some number and square it that it would give me 16? Okay, that is going to be 4, right? So I'm just going to write it as 4 squared, because 4 squared is 16. And now it looks just like the formula that we're given up top. We have x squared minus 4 squared. Off to the side, I'm going to identify what is my a and what is my b. Okay, so if you look, let me write that a little bit nicer. If you look back to the original, it's just the first thing squared is a squared, right? So our a in our problem is really x. And our b is the second thing, which in our case is 4, right? Because it says b squared. So we have 4 squared, so b is 4. And now we just write it as the quantity a plus b times a minus b. So x squared minus 4 squared equals our quantity a, which we said was x for us, plus 4 times x minus 4. And that's it. That is the answer. A lot of students, because you're so used to seeing me give you problems like this from the last unit, then they start doing FOIL to multiply it all out. That's fine. If you want to check your work, you would get the same answer. But the final answer is this guy. So just stop right here. If you want to check your work, you can write on your paper, like I'm just checking my work. But box that, because that really is your final answer. Okay, the next two, I actually want you to try on your own. Maybe just the first one, just that example 2. Just first try to get it started. Okay, so hit pause, and then I'm going to give you a hint because this one's a little bit harder. Just try to get started and then hit play to see if you got the first step right. Okay, so this one is different because now we have that 9. Okay, this is where our exponent rules are going to come in handy, because we learned that if we had some quantity squared, that we would just apply that little 2 to both elements inside the parentheses, right? So the m should be okay. It's this other number that might be a little bit challenging. So to get to 9, what would I square? Square 3. Okay, so I have this 3m, that whole quantity squared, because if I went back and looked, that would be a 9m squared. Okay, minus, now I need to write 4 as something squared. That would be 2 squared, right? Off to the side, I'm going to jot down what RA is. RA is 3m. RB is 2. So we have 3m and 2. So now this just equals the quantity 3m plus 2 times the quantity 3m minus 2. All right, we got that one. go ahead and try the next one. Try to do it all the way, okay? So this one's got both pieces. Might have a little bit something extra that you need to do. So hit pause, give it a try, come back when you're ready. All right, so 25p squared. So I need something squared minus something else squared, right? So for the first one, the p, that's the easy part. The 25, so something squared, so something times itself that equals 25 is going to be 5. Minus, now this one has a little bit more going on, okay, just like that first one. Something squared. The q is the easy part. Now something squared to give me 49, that's going to be 7. Because 7 times 7 is 49. So off to the side, I'm going to jot down RA is 5P and RB is 7Q. So if we were to continue to factor this, it would be the quantity 5P plus 7Q times the quantity 5P minus 7Q. And that's it. We got it. So just to kind of recap, that is called the difference of squares. So difference meaning subtraction, squares meaning that each of those two elements that we're subtracting are something squared, that then we can rewrite as a plus b times the quantity a minus b. All right, the next thing that we're going to look at today is factor by grouping. So when we were looking at difference of squares, that was always two elements with subtraction in between. Factor by grouping, you'll recognize it because there's 4 elements. Okay, so there's 4 things. And what we're going to do is we're going to group them up. So just group up the first 2 and then group up the second 2. Okay, so our first 2, 3x cubed plus 9x squared, we have to try to figure out what do they have in common? What can I pull out? What factors do they share? Okay, so they share a 3, right? And how many x's do they share? Some people want to say x cubed, but it's actually whatever the lowest x value is because we have to factor that out. And you'll kind of see it here once we multiply it. Okay, because we're going to have something that has to go in here that when we multiply it, that 3x squared, we get 3x cubed. And when we multiply it here, we're going to get 9x squared. So if we have 3x squared and we're trying to get to 3x cubed, what do I need to multiply by? The 3 is already there, so we don't have to worry about that. We just need a single x. Okay, because 3x squared times x, working backwards, would give me that 3x cubed. And then plus, if I have 3x squared, I need to multiply it by something to give me the 9x squared. The x squareds are already taken care of. I'm going to have to multiply by a 3. Now the second group, is there anything here that I can factor out? Do they share any common factors? They don't, but it might help you to write, if you see that they don't have a common factor, to still go ahead and put a 1 with the x plus 3. It's just a nice little placeholder. Okay, this next part's super confusing, okay? So you might have to rewind the video and watch it a couple times. Totally normal. Lots of people get hung up on this. Now I'm looking at this whole big thing. I have something times this something plus the 1 times this something. Do these two pieces have some factor in common? What do they both have? They both have this x plus 3. So I'm going to pull that way out front, x plus 3. Now, let me change colors here to try to keep it hopefully easier to follow along. Now I have x plus 3, and I'm trying to figure out what do I put here in this first block to give me this whole 3x squared times the quantity x plus 3. Well, if I have x plus 3 already, right, and I'm trying to get 3x squared times x plus 3, what's going to go here in this first spot is 3x squared. Okay, Now, I have the second piece. I'm trying to get to 1 times x plus 3, right? I already have x plus 3. So if I were to take this whole x plus 3 and multiply it by something to give me 1 times x plus 3, this would just be a 1. And now we have our product here, so we have factored completely. That problem is done. Again, that is a super challenging concept to factor by grouping. So if you don't get it right away, try to watch the video a few times and make sure that you definitely do all the homework for these guys, okay? Let's go ahead and give you another one. See how far you can get on this one. So I have 9x to the 4th plus 6x minus 27x cubed minus 18. So remember, you're going to group them up. Maybe just try to do the first step, okay? So get your first two together and tell me what they would equal, and then your second two. This one's going to be a little bit tricky because of that minus sign. So hit pause, do just the first step, and then come back. Okay, so these first two, we're trying to find the greatest common factor that we can pull out. The 6 doesn't go evenly into the 9, so let's kind of work our way backwards. Let's try 3. 3 would go into both 6 and 9, so I'm going to write down 3. And can I pull out any x's from both of them? Just the 1x, right? So they share the 1x. So 3x times the quantity. Now I'm trying to figure out what times 3x will give me 9x to the 4th. So to get to the 9 would be a 3. And x times something to give me x to the 4th. Remember, you add those exponents, so it would be x cubed. And then I have 3x. I'm trying to get to 6x. So that would be just plus 2. Because 3x times 2 would give me 6x. Now, whenever I see this minus here, I go ahead and pull it out. And so I'd recommend that you do that as well. A minus. What common factor does 27 and 18 share? The greatest one is a 9. You can get a 9 out of both of those. They don't share a common factor of x, so it really is just 9. Times the quantity. If I have negative 9 and I'm trying to get to negative 27x cubed, I would multiply that by a 3x cubed. If I have negative 9 and I'm trying to get to negative 18, right? I'm going to multiply that by a positive 2. Now, do these two pieces, so we have the first piece minus the second piece, do they have a common factor? They do. So go ahead and give it a try, hit pause, hit play when you want to check to see how you did. Go ahead and try to finish off the whole problem. Let's see what happens. So the common factor that they have is this 3x cubed plus 2. So I'm going to pull that way out front. Now, I need to put something in this first block that when I multiply this entire chunk, 3x cubed plus 2, I get 3x times 3x cubed plus 2. I have the 3x cubed plus 2, right? So I multiply it by that 3x. Now in my second piece, we're trying to get to this whole negative 9 times the quantity 3x cubed plus 2. I have 3x cubed plus 2. So what times 3x cubed plus 2 will give me negative 9 times 3x cubed plus 2. It's going to be that negative 9. Again, if you aren't following, this stuff is super, super important. Rewind it, watch it a couple times, okay? It's totally normal if it takes you a couple times to get it. There is one more thing, though. Is this problem factored completely? Is there anything at all that we could pull out of either of those factors to keep it going? There is. Here, look at this. If we wanted to, which we do because we want to factor everything completely, we could pull a 3 out of here. So the way that you probably want to write it is going to look something like this. 3x cubed plus 2. And then you're going to probably want to put a 3 here. And then finally x minus 3. That looks kind of messy to me. It looks like a lot of parentheses. So multiplication, you can write it in any order. So just to make it look nice and clean, I'm going to pull this 3 out front and then rewrite 3x cubed plus 2 with the x minus 3. And now it is factored completely. When you're working through these problems, if you would have recognized way back in the beginning that you could have pulled a 3 out front, you can totally do that. That would be great. But not everybody can see that, so they might just have to do it at the end. So if you do recognize it at the beginning, you would have a 3 out front, and you would just work through the grouping with carrying that 3 out front all the way down. Okay, so it's totally fine. Now I'm going to show you just 2 more problems for today. Okay, so one more time, let's recap what we've done. We started with a difference of squares. A difference means minus. It was 2 terms with a minus in between, where each, the first and second term, were something squared. Then we moved on to factor by grouping. And factor by grouping, you recognize it because you have 4 terms. Every time you see 4 terms, you're going to try to do factor by grouping. Now, we have another one. I have 3 terms. Okay, so I can't do a difference of squares because there's not 2 things with a minus. I can't do factor by grouping because there's not 4 things. We have 3 pieces. We have this number out front, this 3, we're going to call that A. This negative 10, we're going to call that B. This negative 8, we're going to call that C. We are going to break this apart and force it to be 4 terms so we can use factor by grouping. Before I break it apart, I'm just going to rewrite this 3x squared right here and this negative 8 right here. The piece we're going to break apart is this negative 10x. We're breaking him apart to force this to have 4 terms so we can use our factor by grouping. To figure out what those 2 numbers are, is we want to find 2 numbers. Let me write this down because this can get a little bit confusing. 2 numbers that when we multiply them, we get A times C. But when we add them, we get B. So in this problem here, our A was 3, our C is negative 8. So our A times C in this problem is negative 24. Our B is the middle term, is negative 10. So we want to try to find 2 numbers, and when we multiply them, we get negative 24, but when we add them, we get negative 10. Now, some of you out there, you can just look at that and see it. That is awesome. That is so good. You can totally just go with your 2 numbers that you already know them just by looking at it. I cannot always do that, especially if I'm like in a stressful situation, maybe like taking a test or something. So what I like to do is I just jot out all the possible answers and then I find which one will really work. Okay, so I'm not just sitting there brainstorming and missing the correct one. I have all my options available. So I'm just going to try to write out everything that multiplies to just 24. We'll worry about the negative later. So if I had 1 times 24, I could get 24. I could also get to 24 by doing 2 times 12. I could also get there by doing 3 times 8. Or how about 4? 4 times 6 will give me 24. 5 wouldn't work. If I went up to 6, I would just be back to the 6 times 4. So I have all my options here. Now I have to try to look at all these groups and find, is there one of these pairs where if I attached a negative to one of them, I would get a negative 10. Okay, so 1 and 24, I'm not seeing that happening. How about 2 and 12? Just look at just that set. Could I attach a negative to either the 2 or the 12 to give me a negative 10? I can. If I were to stick it with the 2, though, I'm going to do this and I'm going to erase it. If I were to stick it with the 2, to combine, negative 2 and 12 would give me a positive 10. And I want a negative 10. So I'm going to attach that negative to the 12 because 2 combined with negative 12, I get negative 10. So now we know 2 and negative 12 gives me negative 10 when I combine them, and they multiply to negative 24. So now I'm going to bust apart this middle term, this minus 10x, to a 2x and a negative 12x. Now, it doesn't matter which one you want to do. Occasionally, the next step won't work if you swap the order, but in most cases it does. So if the factor by grouping that we're going to do after I write this down doesn't work, just swap your middle two and then it will work, okay? 3 out of 4 times, though, it should work. I'm just going to go ahead and put the 12, this negative 12x, I'm going to write it here because I know that I can get a 3 out of the 3 and the 12. So I'm just thinking that's going to work out kind of pretty, okay? So that's why I'm sticking it there. Plus that 2x. And again, it's going to look nice because I have the 2 and the 8. That's just my preference. You can try it the other way and see if it works. That might be fun. Okay, so now what I've done is that negative 10x, I've busted him apart. Because another way to think of negative 10x is negative 12x plus 2x. And it met our requirements of the a times c and the b, right? Now look at that. Now I have 4 terms, so what do? Now we do factor by grouping. So right here, I want you to hit pause, give it a try, come back when you're ready. Just try to finish off this whole problem all by yourself. See if you can do it. All right, how did it go? Let's see. These first two, what do they have in common? They have the common factor, greatest common factor of 3x. If I have 3x and I'm trying to get to 3x squared, I'm going to multiply by an x. If I have 3x and I'm trying to get to negative 12x, I'm going to multiply by a negative 4. Now, plus this second set, my second group, they have a common factor of 2. And if I have 2 and I'm trying to get to 2x, I'm going to multiply by x. If I have 2 and I'm trying to get to negative 8, I'm going to multiply by negative 4. And here, you'll see that they do have that common factor. So if you did swap the middle two and for some reason it didn't work out, you probably wouldn't have a common factor like this x minus 4, x minus 4. You might have something like x minus 4 and x plus 4. And so in that case, you would want to go back to the previous step, swap your middle two terms, and then it should work out to where you will have this common factor. Okay, so we're going to pull that x minus 4 out front. And now if I have x minus 4 and I'm trying to get to 3x times x minus 4, I'm going to multiply it by 3x. If I have x minus 4 and I'm trying to get to 2 times the quantity x minus 4, I'm going to multiply it here, drop that guy down to a plus 2. So we have x minus 4 times the quantity 3x plus 2. Is there anything else we can factor? There's not. It's totally done. Okay, this one, let's just do one more today, okay? And then tomorrow we'll do lots more practice. But I think this one more will be good for today. And now I have x squared plus 7x plus 10. I can't do a difference of squares because it's not 2 terms separated by subtraction. I can't do factor by grouping because it's not 4 terms. Let's go ahead and force it to be factor by grouping. When I do that, I just drop down the first term. I'm going to carry on that last term. Off to the side, I'm going to note that my a times c, in this case, what is a? It's not x squared because it's whatever's before the x squared. In our case, a is equal to 1, okay? Because there could be a little hidden 1 here, right? You could think of it that way. Our b is 7, and our c is 10. So when we're looking at a times c, 1 times 10 is 10. And our b is 7. So now, again, if you could just see right away what the two numbers are, that when you multiply them, you get 10, and you add them, you get 7, that's awesome, okay? If you need to make a list, that's totally fine. Let's make a list just so we don't lose anybody. Factors of 10, I could do 1 times 10 would give me 10. I could do 2 times 5 to get 10. I can't do 3 or 4. 5 would be the next one, but then I'd just be back to 5 and 2. So those are all the possible pairs. So is there some one of these that you see that if I add them together, I get 7? Yeah, it's going to be this 2 and 5. So let's go ahead and break apart 7x to just 2x and 5x. So plus 2x plus 5x. And in this case, there was no reason why I put the 2x first. I'm just going to try it and see if it works out. If I don't get something clean in the next step that has a common factor, I'm going to swap them and try it again. Okay, so I just took a gamble there, and we're going to give it a try and see how it goes. So out of these first two, actually, you know what? How about hit pause, give it a try, and then we'll come back and do it together, okay? Try to finish this one off by grouping this first two and these second two, okay? Give it a try right now. So what did you find out? These first two, they have x. All right, so I'm pulling x out. So if I have an x, I'm trying to get to x squared. That's going to be x times x. Plus, I have that x. I'm trying to get to 2x. That's going to be just 2. Plus, 5x and 10 have a common factor of 5. If I'm trying to get to 5x, I put in the x. 5 times what will give me that 10? A 2. Now, I have my common factor, this x plus 2, so I pull him out front. And x plus 2 times what will give me x plus 2 times x, that x. Now, if I have x plus 2, and I'm trying to get to 5 times x plus 2, I'm going to do x plus 2 times that plus 5. And that is as far as we can go. All right, awesome job. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. See you tomorrow. Bye.